Tashi Delay, everyone. I'm Ashwin Verghese of the International Campaign for Tibet, and I'm here at the Office of Tibet in Washington, D.C. for a very special episode of Tibet Talks. We're about to go inside to interview Penpa Tsering, the Sikyong, or president of the Central Tibetan Administration. Now, as the Sikyong, Penpa Tsering is the democratically elected political leader of the Tibetan people in exile. So we're very excited to have this conversation with him. And let's go inside now. Sikyong Penpa Tsering, Tashi Delay, and thank you for joining us in Tibet Talks.
Tashi Delay, thank you for having me.
So, how's your visit to North America been so far? You also visited Europe earlier this year. How do you assess the current state of support for Tibet internationally?
I think there is a lot of interest. Unlike before, it's mainly because of China's behavior. And also because of the Ukraine war, there is a lot more interest in Europe. Everybody wants to know more about China. So these days when we visit them, they take note of a lot of things about China, about Tibet. And of course, we just don't talk only about Tibet or East Turkestan or Hong Kong, but also about China, its vulnerabilities, and then the international political situation, what are the challenges and opportunities for Tibet, those kind of things. So yeah, it has been quite productive.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Resolve Tibet Act here in the United States. So this bipartisan bill was reintroduced in Congress last year, which coincided with one of your previous visits to DC. Since then, it has passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Right.
It's passed the entire House. And then just this week, it'll be up for a hearing in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and we obviously hope it'll be approved there. And this episode will air after that meeting. But this bill, once it gets through the committee, it will move to the floor of the Senate for a vote. And from there, it could move to the president's desk to be signed into law. The CTA, the Central Tibetan Administration, has been supportive of this latest congressional initiative. What does it say about this bill that Congress is clearly making it a priority to pass it?
Since I came into office in May 2021, the official policy of the Central Tibetan Administration is the middle way. So when we talk about middle way, then you talk about extreme polarities. If there are no polarities or extremes, then there is no middle way. So to get value for the middle way, you have to recognize the polarities. So the one polarity is the historical status of Tibet as an independent state. And the other polarity is the present situation of Tibet under the communist Chinese government, the repressive Chinese government. Therefore, we decided that just because I'm the Sikyong, I can't change the policy of the Central Tibetan Administration. Parliament just by themselves cannot change the policy. So we will have to go through a referendum if there needs to be a change in policy. So we are committed to following the middle way policy that was initially proposed by His Holiness and approved by the larger number of Tibetans through a public opinion, and then unanimously laid down by the Parliament. So this is the official policy. So based on this policy, if there is no recognition for the historical status of Tibet or the present repressive situation inside Tibet, there is no leverage for the middle way. So we started change in our strategy in terms of focusing on the historical status of Tibet. So since then, we all know that the International Campaign for Tibet, the Office of Tibet here, the Tibetan communities in the United States, the lobbyists, everybody worked together with the Congress over the last more than 1.5, 2 years, as you mentioned. This being reintroduced this time again. So we're very, this is a fruit of our joint labor. And I think this will be very consequential for our movement, because there is not one single country who challenges Tibet's historical narrative that is all too pervasive, spread by China internationally. So if this bill gets passed, then it becomes a law in the United States. And it becomes a mandate for the State Department also to counter China's false narrative on the historical status of Tibet. And once we get the presidential accent, the very reason why I'm also here is this time is because we are only halfway through, having got this through the House. So it's marked up for tomorrow in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And then if it gets approved in the committee, then it'll go to the Senate floor, and with the presidential action, it'll become a law. And this could become a very good tool for us to work with other countries like Canada and Europe and the free world to look at possibilities to pass similar laws or resolutions depending on the form of governments they are in and the situation they are in. So the Tibet Resolve Act is a very important legislation, a very important piece of legislation that challenges China's narrative on Tibet. And it also, in a way, recognizes that Sino-Tibet dispute or conflict is still unresolved. And that's a powerful tool.
Thank you. That's very well said. On a wider level, the Resolve Tibet Act is the third major bipartisan bill on Tibet to advance in Congress in the past few years. In 2018, Congress passed the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, which led the State Department to ban Chinese officials from entering the United States over their role in keeping American citizens out of Tibet. Then in 2020, the U.S. enacted the Tibetan Policy and Support Act, which dramatically expanded U.S. support for Tibetans and for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhist community's right to determine his succession. And now the Resolve Tibet Act is working its way through Congress. What does this support from the United States mean to the Tibetan people?
Well, it definitely means a lot because U.S. is the only government that has a law on Tibet. Our predecessors, Lodi Gary, and our friends in the Congress worked very hard to get the U.S. Tibet Policy Act in 2002 during President Clinton's time. And you know that this is an outcome of a lot of things that happened during that period when during President Clinton's time, China also got the chance to organize their coming out party, the Olympics, the US-China Free Trade Agreement. As an offshoot of that, there's also the Congressional Executive Commission on China, and a year later, the US Tibet Policy of 2002, and you mentioned about the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act. When I was representative here, it was already moved. I know I always acknowledge the leadership of Richard Gere as the board chair of International Campaign for Tibet, and the leadership within the ICT working closely with the Office of Tibet to get these things done. And the amendment to the US Tibet Policy Act, which has now become US Tibet Support and Policy Act, that includes the element of His Holiness reincarnation, is also a very, very important part of that legislation. Because one thing that really concerns the Chinese is the 15th Dalai Lama. They are not concerned about the living 14th Dalai Lama, but they are more concerned about the yet to come 15th Dalai Lama, where they know that if they can lay a hand on the 15th Dalai Lama, they can use it as a political tool to control people, the Tibetan people. And the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Bill is also very important in the sense that in diplomacy, reciprocity is the norm. If Chinese citizen has a visa to come to the United States, they can visit any part of the United States, whereas US citizen, if they have a visa to go to China, they need another permit to go into Tibet. So there were sanctions and counter-sanctions, but I think these are progressive in nature to make China accountable for their actions on human rights, on religious freedom, on protection of Tibetan environment, and Tibetan way of life. At present, under President Xi Jinping's leadership, everything, every policy, every program is aimed at destroying the identity of the nationalities, including Tibetans, Turkistanis, or Mongolians. And we also see the whole overall China, there is a lot more control and surveillance, with the anti-espionage law that has now gone down to the grassroots, where people live in fear, and every individual is now reduced to a barcode, and you're always afraid of being blacklisted all the time, and you live in constant fear. And then you also have the amendment to the national security law, which makes it very, very difficult for people. And they've also introduced the data security law. So all these are not helping China. So at the present moment, you have China wants to keep its hegemonic ambitions in the region and globally. Now they're not talking only about China, they're talking about global security, global economic, global civilizational initiatives. So they want to export their forms of governance and their interpretation of what basic principles should be. So in that sense, these laws are a real challenge to the Chinese government. And an attempt to make them accountable for the wrong things they're doing. And hopefully, maybe not immediately, but this will, in the long run, will help China or bring positive changes to China. And we also tell the governments that we meet that please don't look at us as victims of communism. If you can look at us as partners or allies. Nobody wants anarchy in China. It's the second largest economy. It will have serious consequences to the whole world. But if you want to bring positive changes in China, then you need both internal forces and external forces. And we are the internal forces, the Tibetans, the Christianis, or Mongolians, or Hong Kongers, even Taiwanese. So all these help us to reach out to other governments and tell them this is what the United States have done for us. So is there anything that they can also, support these initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a lot about the U.S. government, but you are the democratically elected Sikyong, or president of the Central Tibetan Administration, which provides democratic governance for Tibetans in exile. Can you give us an update on the work of the CTA and what some of your current projects are?
Our two responsibilities, one is to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict, and other is to look after the welfare of the Tibetan diaspora community, mainly in India and Nepal. We have a very small population in Bhutan now. So we discussed about the political side, but I always tell our people and also our supporters that we have to realize certain realities. And if we have to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict through the middle way policy, then it is based on non-violence. It's based on a negotiated solution. It's based on a mutually beneficial solution that would be lasting. And this message, I think, is very, very important for the world at the present time. As His Holiness says, we expected this 21st century to be more peaceful century because people are now more educated, people are much more economically better than before. But unfortunately, because of the actions of few leaders, the world has entered into this turmoil of violence everywhere, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, or Gaza. Now you have Iran, Israel. A lot of things going on. So the message of peace and non-violence is very, very important. Then the other reality is that till such a time, so the reality here is that if there has to be a peaceful resolution, there is no other way than by talking with the Chinese government. I have admitted to having informal back channels with the Chinese, and then some people ask us, what expectations do you have? We don't have immediate expectations if you look at what Xi Jinping is doing to China and Tibet and other nationalities. But the Sino-Tibet conflict has been going on for the last 65 years or more. And we always think long term. So we are looking at the changes that are happening in China and the overall international scenario, what's also going on inside Tibet, and then look at opportunities and challenges when the time comes. So this is one reality. And the other reality is that till such a resolution is there with the Chinese, we have to reach out to the international community. And we have to realize that no nation, including the United States, will leave aside their national interest for the interests of Tibet. Now the question is, how do we align our interests, the Tibetan interests, and that nationalist interest, whether it's United States or Canada or other countries in the European Union or anywhere else. So this is how we have to apply our mind and strategize and develop programs to meet those ends. Now, in terms of looking after the welfare of Tibetans, over the last 65 years, we received a lot of support from many governments, many individuals and organizations. And with the long-term vision of His Holiness Dalai Lama, we have become an exemplary community in exile or a government in exile with a full-fledged democratic structure. We have our own parliament, we have our judiciary, we have our cabinet, we have the autonomous institutions of Election Commission, the Auditor General's Office, and the Public Service Commission, and all the executive bodies that extends to the grassroots in a democratic way. But at the same time, there are a lot of challenges that people face in terms of livelihood. So one of the challenges that we faced was the dispersing compact communities. So in the 60s, of course, no one expected that we would have to live in exile for so long, 65 years already. Many people thought that we will go back, just like during the 13th Dalai Lama's time. But it has taken 65 years. But His Holiness always had this very long vision. So he developed democracy and all these democratic organs. One of the achievements of the exiled community was also establishment of compact communities where Tibetans live together within a specified area in India in different locations. Now, more and more young people are moving out. Mm-hmm. So childbearing of young people of childbearing age, then it has a cyclical impact on the less number of children. It impacts the school system. So these are things that we have to think about. How do we integrate our school systems? How do we keep our community vibrant? So another challenge that we found was the Tibetans who arrived from Tibet in the last 30-40 years, they don't own anything, not even an inch of land to build a house or make a livelihood. So we decided to combine these two challenges, because one challenge is a solution for other. So now one of the extra responsibility that we have, the 16th cabinet under my leadership has taken, is to build back compact communities, what we call as BBCC. So now we are focusing on providing housing for those Tibetans who don't have houses into the larger communities so that we can make it vibrant. And that alone is not enough. So we have to provide for livelihood as well. So these are challenges, but then the opportunity is also that now you find Tibetans in some more than 25 different countries. They have become nationals, they speak the language, they understand the system. And if they understand a little more about China and Tibet, then they could be the best advocates for Tibet. That is why we created this platform called the Voluntary Tibet Advocacy Group, where every Tibetan can come and take part in that initiative. And it's essentially more for the younger generations of Tibetans. So wherever I go, I travel to about 24 different countries in the last 2 years. Wherever there are Tibetan community, one of my promise to the community is that I will visit every single community 2 times in 5 years. So it's not just visiting the community, talking to them and come back, but meet with the elder generations, visit every single camp, visit every single institution, look at people's problems, identify them, then bring it up to Dharamsala, and then also now we're doing a lot of changes in administration in terms of how do we budget long-term, short-term. Also developing a database, because Tibetans are never good at numbers. Never focused on database or statistics. So now we have a big program with the funding from USAID through the NDI to develop institutional development index on human resources, capacity building, and all that. So we will be developing a good database, make necessary changes to structure to focus on delivery of funds. Whatever we receive is used for what it's meant for in time and good quality, and then development of processes and systems. So this is one of my commitments to get it done. And we are also not lacking behind in using technology, because since we are a dispersed community, now we want to e-governance, digitization of all the old documents. And another project is also to scan every available Tibetan scripture and then put it under one roof. This can be there till the end of the end of this world, till eternity. So these are some of the things that we are doing. So sometimes I say we have tilled the land in Dharamsala. Now we have to sow, we have to get rain, water, air, everything, and make it grow. So the amount of time that I spend in managing the institutions in Dharamsala is about half of my time, and half of the time, half of the year, I keep traveling around the world to speak to countries, meet with parliamentarians, think tanks, media. So fortunately, because of His Holiness, and also because of what China is doing internationally, there's a lot more interest, and we have also managed to create quite a good media profile over the last 1 year.
Mm-hmm. So many of our audience members are dedicated followers of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Mm-hmm. As a Sikyong, you have regular interaction with him. Can you give us an update on His Holiness and how His Holiness is doing?
His Holiness is going to be 89 this July. He is very healthy. And just before coming this side, on 3rd of this month, we had a long life prayer offering to His Holiness. And as usual, he keeps assuring us that he will live for another 20 years or up to 113 years of age. So as supporters, you all know that there are propitious pre-signs that this Dalai Lama will live very long. So whenever His Holiness keeps saying this, then I tell the Chinese, this message is for you, because you're waiting for this Dalai Lama to die. And His Holiness keeps assuring us that he will live long. He still says that I have not lost one teeth. And so I keep telling the Chinese, let us see whether His Holiness Dalai Lama outlives the Communist Party or the Communist Party outlives His Holiness. Except for his knee, His Holiness is very well. And every week he meets with 500, 600 people 3 times in a week, every Monday, every Wednesday, and every Friday. And then of course, now that His Holiness does not travel as much as he used to do before, so a lot of visitors come from outside, and he meets with all the visitors. And annually, he makes a sojourn to Gaya, where he gives teachings. Mm-hmm. And every July, August, His Holiness travels to Ladakh, because the climatic conditions there are much more suitable to his health. And I personally meet with His Holiness whenever I have to update him on what we are doing, and also seek His Holiness guidance more particularly on Sino-Tibet relations. Otherwise, all the administrative work, we are doing it by ourselves, and we are able to do it all because of His Holiness.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that update. I have one final question for you. What is your message for our ICT members who have been steadfast supporters of the Tibetan people for many years?
I think one of the reasons why we have been so successful in the United States is because of the establishment of International Campaign for Tibet, starting from Namgyel Tethong way back in 1989, succeeded by Lori Gary, and then all the board members who have been there for a very, very long time. And there have been successive leadership in ICT who has worked very hard to get to where we are today. And today you have Richard Gere as the chairman of the ICT board, and his commitment is incomparable. Of course, I had relations with him much before I became Sikyong, because I was in the parliament for 20 years and speaker for 7.5 years. But since I assumed the Sikyong's role, this is perhaps my fifth visit to Washington, D.C., except for one time when Richard was not very well. Even when he was not very well, he was online with us. So he has been there all through with us, and his leadership has been very, very powerful and very impactful, not only at the Hill, but in other domains as well. So the mantra of the success and sustainability of International Campaign for Tibet is also due to John Ackley's idea of having membership. When you seek funding, you might get a large funding at one time, but if that might, go away once it's done. So with membership, every single year, every supporter contributing whatever they're able to contribute sustains this institution. And because of their support, we are able to achieve as much as we have been, working closely with the Office of Tibet. So one of my conditions with the Office of Tibet is that ICT and Office of Tibet has to work very, very closely, because we have very limited resources, both financial and human. So we have to get all our resources together. Three values that I espoused during my election was that we will follow equity in everything we do. So equitable distribution of resources. You don't ask whether you are Kampa or Amdo or Wisang. We look at everybody in the same lens. And the second is cooperative effort. So what we achieve here in the United States is a cooperative effort of the Office of Tibet and International Campaign for Tibet, the Tibetan communities, the young Tibetans who are lobbying, including students for Free Tibet. So it's carrying on. And the third value that we talked about is moving forward. Now we have no space to move back. Now we have to move forward. And everybody is working toward that. And I'm very happy, very thankful to all the members of International Campaign for Tibet, whether you are actively there or not every single day. Your contribution pays for all the people who are working in ICT, and they are doing a fantastic job. We are very proud of them, and we love working with them. And with all this cooperative effort, we are looking for more heights to achieve.
Sikyong Penpa Tsering, it's an honor to have you on Tibet Talks. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you once again to Sikyong Penpa Tsering for joining us on this very special episode of Tibet Talks. And thank you as well to all of you for joining us on this program and supporting ICT's work. I hope you take the Sikyong's message about the importance of ICT members to heart. We'll be back next month with another episode of Tibet Talks. But until then, as we always say on the show, stay safe, stay well, and stay active. Thank you, and Tuja Che.